Hey guys, I'm about ready to go to bed, but I want to make my sourdough bread for tomorrow, so I thought I would go ahead and get it started tonight and show you guys. So this is the second video that I want to do on my dry starter versus my wet starter for sourdough. So I am in the process of changing this wet starter over to a dry starter, and obviously you can see this is nice and bubbly. You can see on the bottom all those great bubbles. I've already taken my section out here so I can get my bread started, but I want to bake a loaf. So I'm using two different recipes, and I will definitely get them up on my website as soon as possible, but I want to just get this started and see how do these breads compare, and which one do we like better, and which one's the easiest, and which one can I maintain the best. So I have left this in my refrigerator since I shared that video with you guys. I've just left this. I have done nothing with it, and you can see it doesn't come out. It just kind of hangs out. So I've taken my 30 grams of starter out of here, and I'm gonna literally put the lid on and put it back in the fridge just like this. So in this bowl right here, I have my 30 grams of starter, and that's what I'm gonna use to make our bread for tomorrow. Now, right here, in this big bowl, I actually usually make a batch and a half of this particular recipe because I use a very large Dutch oven. But if you use a smaller Dutch oven, you can use just the regular recipe. So I'll share both of those. Like I said, I'm working really hard to go ahead and get recipes up on my blog for you guys. But for now, I'll just walk you through it and you can just follow along. So in this bowl, I have let's see, 4.5 cups of flour, and I have about 2.5 to 3 teaspoons of salt. And then I have this large mixing bowl here. I'm just gonna fill it with very, very warm water. And we're gonna mix up our wet sourdough starter bread, and we're also going to do our dry sourdough starter bread. So I hope this doesn't get too complicated with you, but I wanted to show you the verses. Which one do we like better? Okay, so that's very hot. I'm going to back it off so it's just a little bit warm. I filled this all the way full, just because that's easiest. We had my son's birthday party, so we've used all the forks. So I gotta wash one here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and tear this scale out over here. So there we go, great. And to this, let's set that aside and make this a little less confusing. To our dry sourdough starter, we're gonna add 130 grams of water. Now this is warm water. I'm not very used to using a scale yet. So I got a little bit too much. Perfect. Okay, so to our 30 grams of dry starter, I added 130 grams of water. That's very warm water. And now I'm just going to tare that back to 0. And I'm going to go ahead and mix that in really well. Now, what you're kind of doing here is you are waking up that starter. My starter's been in the refrigerator, so it's very cold. You're just going to mix it up. Now, I'm following along with the Elliot Homestead. I don't know if you guys have seen that channel or not. It's really great for inspiration. So she actually has an amazing sourdough kind of tutorial video, and that's what I'm following along with. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I waste so much sourdough starter, and I have killed so many starters just because you have to feed your sourdough starter so much more than this dry version. And I thought I would see if our family likes this better. We don't make bread. We just don't really eat bread frequently enough. And I really, really don't like waste. So, okay, so that's just milky looking and all mixed together. So I'm just going to leave that back there on our scale. Now, I'm going to switch back over. This is our wet sourdough starter bread. And the reason I'm doing all of this together with you guys is because you have to start it very long in advance. So it's 9 o'clock at night right now. And I'm not going to do anything with these until tomorrow morning. And I will definitely take you along for the process. So I have mixed about 4.5 cups of flour and about 2.5 to 3 teaspoons of salt into this. Now I'm going to take my wet sourdough starter and I'm going to add, so I fed this just about an hour ago. So it's very, very active. I had my cup, measuring cup, sitting right here. Oh, it's in the flour. It's the end of the night after a big birthday party. I'm a little tired. Okay, so I'm just going to add to this a nice cup, an overflowing cup. And that kind of accounts for the bubbles that are in here. To this bowl. Now, I have made this recipe many times very successfully. The dry sourdough starter, I have never used this recipe, and I have never made bread with my dry sourdough starter before, but so I know that this batch is going to turn out and it's going to be wonderful. Okay. And then, so this recipe says 1 5/8 cup of warm water. I don't go by measuring anymore, so I just fill up my whole thing partly because I always make a batch and a half. And that's too much math for this mama. So I just know about what it's supposed to look like. So I'm just going to pour in a bit of water. I'm going to mix this in. So that's still way too dry. I'm going to add a little bit more water. And we're just going for a very wet dough here. So an extremely stiff pancake batter is kind of what we're after. So this is kind of a moist, or about like a biscuit dough. That's not quite enough. So we're gonna add just a little bit more water here. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen my other sourdough my video where I've converted this into the dry method or not. And I would be happy to link that in the cards above there so you can watch that video if you want to. I am certainly not an expert sourdough maker by any means, but I would like to take my skills to the next level, and I'd really like to help you guys troubleshoot. Something that I have, and I'm happy to share with you guys, is I have failed so many times making sourdough, it's ridiculous. And so I can tell you all the things not to do. But the great thing about failure is you know that you're never going to make that same mistake again. Okay, so you can see this is an extremely stiff pancake batter or a very wet biscuit dough. But I have all of the flour incorporated. And there's not any pockets of flour or anything like that. So I'm just going to leave this on my counter now for a whopping 18 hours. Now, I know that sounds like a really long time. You just have to get in the habit of planning ahead, and it turns out so good. So I'm actually going to cover this with saran wrap, and I will certainly be on the hunt for something like what Shea has in her video, which is like a ceramic bowl with a lid. I love that idea. I hate using saran wrap, plastic wrap, whatever you want to call it. But for now, that's what I have. So I just have this nice bowl, and I'll cover it up, and I'm just going to leave it on my counter at room temperature for 18 hours, and then I'll show you the next step. Now, well, my hands are just going to stay messy. That's okay. This wet sourdough starter is now going to go back in my refrigerator, and it's going to sleep, but it's only going to sleep for about a week before I'm going to have to take it back out and feed it again. A lot of times I will take it out, feed it, and then feed it one more time, and then make my bread and put it right in the fridge. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I just fed this again, like I said, an hour ago. And so it's already been fed enough to survive being in the fridge. Some people use just a sealable lid. I've never done that. Maybe it's a better thing. I don't know. If you do know, I would love to know what you think. So put that in the comments for me. I will take your advice. Okay, back to our dry sourdough bread. So I have added 30 grams of this dry sourdough starter, 130 grams of water, and I've mixed it really well. And now I'm going to add in 120 grams of flour. So I'm putting it back to 0. It's still on grams. I don't even know if I have enough flour in this thing. So close. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to mix this up. This is going to make a much smaller loaf, I can already tell. Now, I think what's basically happening here, and if I've listened to Shea's video correctly, then I have just made my 1 cup of wet sourdough starter. Okay, so this is the equivalent. So if I wanted to make the same exact bread recipe, I could now make this dry recipe into my wet recipe. But I don't want to do that. I actually really want to try out Shea's recipe because I got some Banneton baskets for Christmas, and I'm super excited to use those. So we're going to use that. Okay, so here's the texture. Okay, so it's very stretchy and very wet. It's no longer like this tacky dry starter. But I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna leave this on my counter covered with plastic wrap for 6 to 10 hours. Now, it's definitely going to be, in this case, 10 hours because I'm doing it overnight. And I will do my best to not leave it more than the 10 hours. So that's all we're going to do tonight. I'm going to cover these up, and I'm just going to leave them on my counter, and we will pick this back up tomorrow. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so the next step is for our wet sourdough starter bread that we're doing. I'm just going to keep on letting this sit for a while. That's the leaven for that. And then I have the dry sourdough starter bread. We're just making a basic loaf of bread here. This is set on the counter overnight for 11 hours. That's a little bit longer, but we had a sleepover and birthday party last night, so it'll be fine. It looks great. I can show it to you. It's nice and bubbly. Now, I did notice in her description, you're not supposed to use a metal bowl, but that's what I have. And it's obviously still alive. So if you have a big enough bowl for your breads, maybe don't use metal. There we go. All right, so we're gonna turn on our scale. It's set to grams still. Perfect. I need some warm water here. Okay, so we're gonna add in 300 to 315 grams of water to our leaven here. Perfect. Okay, and then we're gonna add in, well, we can mix that in. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and tear this back out to 0. Perfect. And then I'm gonna add in 600 grams of flour. I'm just using an all-purpose flour today. I used to make a lot of whole wheat breads and things, but they are a little trickier and they definitely taste a lot stronger. So I guess when I had kids is when I sort of stopped doing that. But in her video, she tells you how to do it with whole grain flour, or einkorn flour is what she uses. Like I said, I'm just using what I have. My goal is to make my kids eat this food. Well, we're close enough. Okay. It's very close. There. Now it's perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off the scale here. And I'm going to mix that up. Now this is definitely a lot more dry than the other recipe. That's what I'm noticing first off here. And that's just fine. This is definitely, so the other recipe that I'm doing is definitely more of a very, very thick pancake. And this is more of a sticky biscuit dough. Okay. I think we have everything incorporated pretty good. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the sink. Now I'm just gonna put this wrap on here for 15 minutes.
Hey, what is that?
Okay, it's been 15 minutes. So I'm just gonna lightly flour this countertop. I'm gonna dump my dough out. It's nice and stiff. And then she says to use one of these, which I happened to get one for Christmas, and you're just gonna stretch. I'm not gonna be very good at this. Just stretch and fold it on top of each other. Turn it, stretch it, fold it. And I'm just gonna do it from each side.
Why are you talking to the camera?
I am teaching people to make bread.
Oh, some people don't know how to make bread?
Yep.
Oh.
Okay.
So it doesn't, Mom?
I have a lot of learning to do.
This is from
Okay.
Happy Birthday.
And then
This is from Nana.
I'm just gonna flip it over,
Wait, what is this from Nana?
and we're gonna let it rest for 15 more minutes. Okay, it's been 15 minutes again. We're going to do the exact same thing. We just stretch it,
Green Ninjas.
fold it over itself. And it's definitely changing textures, like, significantly. Okay, that should do. We're gonna fold it back over and do one more 15 minutes. Okay, another 15 minutes is up. We're just gonna stretch it again. And one last time. Okay, and then we're gonna put it, I'm gonna flour this bowl a bit. We're just gonna put it into our bowl, cover it again, and now we're gonna let it sit for 3 to 5 hours. My house is cooler, so I'm gonna imagine it's gonna take a little longer. But we're just looking for the loaf to get, she says, about 30% bigger. So definitely not doubled. So I'll see you in a couple hours. All right, we're gonna call that good. Looks pretty good. It's been about 3 hours or so. Okay, so here's my Vanneton basket. I might not be saying that quite right, but that's all right. Okay, I'm just gonna flour it really well. Tip out some of that. Okay, so it's nice and floured. I don't think it's gonna get as tall as this. This is my first time using my Christmas present. I'm so excited. And then we're gonna be very careful and take this out of here. It's very sticky. Okay, I'm just gonna fold it sort of under itself a bit. Okay. And then I'm gonna place it in here and I'm gonna cover it back up again with this plastic wrap. And we're just gonna let it proof. Now it's gonna proof in this basket for an hour. And about halfway through that hour, I'm going to turn the oven on with the Dutch oven and the lid in the oven, and I'm gonna preheat the oven to 475. And I want to make sure that Dutch oven is super hot when this goes in, so we're gonna make sure it preheats really well and that is in there for about half an hour. All right, guys, it has been an hour. Look at that. Take the lid off. Well, the plastic stuck. Right? Nothing is ever perfect, yeah? Good thing that's going to be on the bottom, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and put some flour in the bottom of my Dutch oven, just as extra insurance. Then we're gonna flip this out into our Dutch oven very carefully. There we go. That was a little hard. Look at that. We've got nice lines on it though. Then I'm just gonna score the top of it. I'm gonna put the lid back on. And we're gonna bake it in the oven for a half an hour. So if you guys are wanting the full recipe and the tutorial, like in total, I highly recommend checking out the Elliot Homestead channel here on YouTube. She goes through all kinds of how to troubleshoot your starter, your leaven and your bread, literally every single thing you can imagine. So right now I'm really just walking you guys through it. This is my first time making her recipe, but I wanted to compare it, the dry with my wet starter, and see how the different recipes work and how they taste and all that kind of stuff. I should mention that I forgot to put the salt in, and you should put the salt in either when you make your leaven or when you're mixing up your dough. And she says about 2 teaspoons of salt. So anyway, I thought I would make a note of that, and yeah, so let's keep going. As soon as this bread is done baking for about 30 minutes, then I'm going to bake it with the lid off at the same temperature for about 15 minutes, and then I'll pull it out. And right now, our other starter right here, this is our other dough, is still rising. So it takes 18 hours to rise. We started it last night together, and yep, so I'm just gonna let it keep sitting on the counter for a while longer. Actually, we're gonna have to run out and go to gymnastics, and then I'll finish it when I get back. So yeah. Thanks for joining me for this very long, kind of a fun little endeavor. If you guys are enjoying this video so far, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button, or give us a thumbs up, and we will have many, many more sourdough videos, I'm sure. I will probably do one here in the near future on troubleshooting. I just haven't gotten that far yet. And as you can see, I'm not the most amazing sourdough maker, but I'm still learning. I love the fact that it's an art and not a science. Hey guys, it is much later in the day. My sourdough loaf from the dry starter turned out so good. As you can see, there's only a little bit left. I did take a picture, so I'll go ahead and put that in here so you can see. It turned out really good. The texture's super great. It is a little bit more labor intensive. And I did get some of the lines from the Banneton basket. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Which I was pretty pleased with. I hope that I can figure out how to get the loaf to turn out a little darker. That could have to do with what kind of wheat I'm using. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's definitely lots of room for me to improve. But I am really happy with the way that this loaf turned out. It rose perfectly. So there is that loaf. I wasn't able to film that part. I had a friend stop by, which was great because I could send her home with fresh hot bread. She'd not had homemade sourdough to her recollection before, so I was happy to share that with her. So it is a bit later. So this has actually been proofing for 22 hours. So this is way longer than usual. But fortunately, that doesn't matter, and this looks great. So I may end up with not quite as fluffy of a loaf of bread, but as you can tell, it hasn't fallen. It's doing just fine. So this is the dough from my wet starter. So I have made this recipe that I'm going to share with you today. I've made it many times. It was given to me by a good friend, and she actually has her own YouTube video, so I'm going to try to link that into the description. I'm not really good at that yet, but I'm learning, so I'll try to figure it out, and I'll link her video in the box below. That way you guys have access to that one, and then I'm just going to go ahead and walk you through it as well. I will go ahead and put this recipe in the description box, but stay tuned because I will be having a recipe box on my website where all these recipes will be easy, printer friendly, and you guys can have those. So let's go ahead and get this in its final stages here so that I can go to bed at a decent hour. I'm going to lower this down so you can see my counter here. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and really heavily flour my counter. This is a very wet dough. Now I may end up playing around with this recipe now that I have made this dry sourdough starter. Pardon the dishes in the sink. We just got done with dinner. Mondays are always a late, busy night. Why I chose to make sourdough on this day, I'm not really sure, but I did. So here we go. Now it must be done. Okay, and then I'm going to, so I try really hard not to have any holes. You can always use the flour over if you don't get it messy. So anyway, that's pretty good. So now I'm just going to take this. I like to use this little rubber spatula because it's pretty stiff and I can just scrape it right out. Okay, so then you're just going to kind of spread it out a bit, and then you're going to sprinkle flour over it pretty heavily, and then you want to make sure you get it so there are no pockets, because if you leave pockets of flour, then what's going to happen is you're going to have ribbons of or bands of flour inside your bread. You really don't, that doesn't taste good. Nobody wants that. Okay, and then once you've got it good, you're just going to spread it over. Basically, it's the same. So I actually made this a lot more stiff than I normally do, and I think I'm going to be a lot happier with that. So basically, you're just still doing the same stretching method that Shea showed us, which if you make this into a more stiff dough, that stretching becomes a lot easier. But I have done it where it's very wet and the bread still turns out great. You're just basically forming a nice loaf. Okay. And then I have a piece of parchment paper here, which I am going to flour. You can also use cornmeal, but I've actually found I have better success with flour. Now, I think at this point, you could proof this in your banneton basket, and maybe I will do a test run with that and with the same recipe and see how that turns out for me. But for now, since I know how this bread works, and I just wanted to test it side by side with this other one, we're gonna do it how I usually do. I've got my Dutch oven here, which you can tell is very well seasoned. I use this pan a lot. I'm just gonna lift up the whole thing. I use the parchment paper because if I don't, then it sticks every single time. And I actually did not use parchment paper with this one, and I was very relieved that it didn't stick. And I have just a pair of kitchen scissors, and I just snip the top. You can also use a sharp knife or anything like that. It just helps the dough to rise more evenly. And like I said, I'm going to keep playing around with sourdough. I really want to be able to give you guys a full sourdough tutorial and, you know, just keep on making our art perfected. So this is just the way that I was showed to make this. So now I have the lid on this. I'm going to go ahead. There you guys are. I'm going to go ahead and just stick this in my oven. Since my oven is not on, I'm going to turn on the oven light. And I'm going to let it sit for 30 minutes because it's late. And I don't want to be up super late making this bread. So, and we'll probably use this bread tomorrow. My kids love, they call this Haven bread because of our friend. And, so, they have come to really love French toast with Haven bread, as they call it. So I will probably make that for breakfast tomorrow with this. We have our loaf that is proofing for 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on how much time you have, in a cold oven with the oven light on. Then we're going to turn the oven light off and we're going to preheat the oven to 500 degrees. As soon as you hear the beep of the oven and it is preheated to 500 degrees, I find 30 minutes is a good equivalent. You are going to immediately turn the oven down to 475 degrees and bake it for 18 minutes. And then after the 18 minutes, you're going to turn it down again to 450, take the lid off, and bake it for another 18 minutes. Now, I have found that if I make this particular recipe and I do it really wet, it spreads too much in my Dutch oven because I have a larger Dutch oven. So in order to make up for that, and because I have a family of children who love bread, so I have started making this recipe. So I will post in the description box the exact recipe, but I tend to make a batch and a half when I'm doing it. And that has made taller, fluffier loaves that do not spread too far so that the loaf isn't flat and oblong like I've had trouble with before. And so when I do that, I also adjust my baking time and I just bake it for about 2 more minutes in each cycle. So I preheat it for the 30 minutes or, until my oven is preheated to 500. And then I do, 19 or 20 minutes with the lid on and then 19 or 20 minutes with the lid off. And I just judge it by what it kind of looks like. And that's something you're just going to have to learn on your own. And your oven may be different, so you may have to adjust these baking times as well. So yeah, this is exciting. I'm glad I'm finally getting to do this. So yeah, if you're loving this video, please hit the thumbs up and we'll keep having more videos coming at you. Okay, our timer is about to go off. I've got the rest of the loaf here from our dry sourdough starter. And then I'm gonna pull out the wet sourdough starter and see how it looks. Now, I know this one's gonna turn out better looking because I've made it more times, but I have a feeling that they are really both going to be just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out and get our loaf over here. Absolutely perfect, and it's not even that late. So obviously I'm not going to cut into this tonight, it's going to be way too hot. But so I wanted to give out one more shout out to my friend Debbie Drake, who I'll link her video in the description for you guys on her video on how to make this specific loaf. But I definitely wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of the wet sourdough starter that I'm used to making and this dry sourdough starter that I've never made before. And to be honest, since I've had this so many times, I can tell you they're really, really similar. This one, I think, even though it's a little more finicky and you have to work with it a little bit more, I think it turned out better. They're so similar. I think it really just comes down to technique. So I think I can even fiddle with this recipe a little bit. Not with the ingredients per se, but just with more of the method. And I think I can kind of combine the two. So I'll work with it a little, and then I'll do another video and I will show you what I come up with. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of crazy video. But yeah, I've had fun hanging out with you guys. So we'll see you guys again real soon.